Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon area. Now, for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about. And this evening, my guest, Mary Lee Darr, and I are going to talk about the return of Mary Lee Darr. The return of Mary Lee Darr because we had a friendship and other relationships a long, long time ago. Was it 40 years ago or something?
About 40 years ago, mid-70s.
Mid-70s, yeah. And she showed up here recently in my email, and I said, "You're still alive?" But we were in touch with each other by email occasionally, but rarely, because we had lived different lives in different parts of the country. And I decided, let's see if I can figure some sort of a way to get her out here and go on the show. And here she is. How you feeling?
Good. Good to see you again.
I haven't shook hands with you for a long. Do it again. That's good. And we have a lot of stuff to talk about because Mary Lee has had an interesting life and career all these years. There's so much to cover. We're going to need 3 hours to cover the things I want to talk to you about. And we'll just be spontaneous and have a good time visiting together. And as you know, my viewing audience is a whole range of intellectual ability and whatever. I've interviewed pizza makers, truck drivers, professors, MDs, and whatever, as you've seen on the show. So we're going to see where we're going to go spontaneously. So there's, as you know, the show goes in 2 major parts. The first part is a bio part, where I talk to you about who you are personally. And we're not doing any psychiatric examinations now, because you're an expert at that. And then the second part, we'll have other things that we'll talk about that you're interested in. And if there's time, I have a couple of things that I mentioned that may be worth talking about, and we'll just see where it goes from there, okay?
Okay.
And along the way, if I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, you don't have to answer.
Okay.
Just don't give me that look. But you never did give me a look, did you? Yes,
no.
And I also married you and your first husband a long time
That's
ago.
right, you did.
Yeah. See, I will have these spontaneous coming up. And oh, by the way, I mentioned to you earlier before the camera started rolling, one of the things I do nowadays is do poetry, among other things, and singing. And I have a poem from one of my poet friends that we meet once a month, and I think it was so good. Occasionally, if it's worth it, I will read it on the show, because my viewers appreciate, I think, the poetry readings I do now and then on occasion. So, let's see. Let's start with the first thing is we'll talk about who you are. If I ask your best friend, Mary Lee, who is Mary Lee? What would your best friend say? Be your best friend, first person.
Oh, gee.
Mary Lee is?
Is an animal lover, avid traveler, avid reader.
A lot of avids?
Avids. Avids, not rabbids.
Okay. And let's see, when and where were you born?
Cincinnati, but my parents lived in Kentucky, but there weren't any hospitals there, so they had to go across the Ohio River to Cincinnati when I was born.
Do you remember that?
No.
See,
I was thinking about that.
Gotcha questions. Why were you born?
Why was I born?
Why does everyone repeat the question back to me? How you doing now? Okay.
Yeah.
So why were you born? And this is the last one, trick question. Okay. Interesting, the responses I get with that question. It's a whole range of responses, and there's no association with their responses and their religious upbringing and those kinds of things. Just come out of the blue. The idea of why were you born? For me, I was born to be nice to people. Simple as that. Mama taught me that when I was very small, boy, whatever you do, be nice. And I can just subsume everything else about the ways of why I was born with that, because I'm trying to practice that or walk that talk and finding it's useful for me. And I get to feel good a lot. It is illustrated by this sign that you're seeing here. And it encourages people to talk to me, and I'll find some sort of a way to be nice.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, I'm getting better at it. Yeah. So you want to reconsider your answer? Why were you born?
Well, that's a very good answer.
Okay, I like it. All right. Anything significant about your racial or cultural heritage that's worth repeating for the viewers? Maybe you're just American white bread and nothing significant about you. Nothing.
You don't remember?
Yes.
Yeah, you did.
But the audience doesn't know. That's what I'm asking you.
My mother's side is all Irish. And my father's side was a little more diverse. He was born in Tennessee, and his lineage is Sioux and Cherokee, and some Irish and English.
It's coming back to me now. Do it for the sake of the viewers.
And the family story is, although the tribe didn't believe this when I tried to get recognition by the tribe, that Crazy Horse is my great-great-uncle, that my great-grandmother was Crazy Horse's older sister.
I forgot about that.
Although the tribe hadn't heard about that he had an older sister. But I think she was about maybe 11 or 12 or 13 years older than he was. And she was married off to a white trader, fur trader, when she was about 13, and was taken to live in, I think it was Virginia. I always forget if it's Virginia or North Carolina. And he was a graduate of one of the first graduates of the law school there, either Virginia or North Carolina Law School. But his family was in the fur trade, and he'd seen her, and he must have been in his mid-20s when he bought her for, it was something like 3 pinto ponies and 10 Winchester rifles.
He bought her.
Well, that was the dowry.
Yes,
but
of
essentially it's the bride price. And so he took her back to the East Coast, and she had 3 sons with him, the oldest of whom was my grandfather. And then the marriage didn't last because his family, they changed her name from Stehutawa to Elizabeth. Not Elizabeth, but Elizabeth. Emmeline Case. And the marriage didn't work out, and she left him. And somehow, I don't know how she got the money together, but she got a Conestoga wagon and took the 3 children back across country and went to Oklahoma. And I'm not sure why she went to Oklahoma instead of back to South Dakota. But she went there without GPS or cell phone.
You had to throw that in, didn't you?
Yeah. Back in this would probably be in the early, mid-1870s. And she traveled back with the 3 boys, and her oldest boy, my grandfather, he rode shotgun and fought off people who attacked them, whether it was white people or other Indian tribes who attacked them on the way.
Where did you gather all this information that you're relating to me right now?
Well, from
historical records?
No, from my father, because he knew Stehutawa.
Oh, yes.
She lived with him part-time. She lived, I think, into her late 80s, which was a long time for somebody born way back when she was. Because she had my grandfather, I think he was born around 1860. And so to support the 3 kids, she joined the Buffalo Bill Wild West show, and she was a trick pony rider. And I did try looking up records from when I went to Wyoming to the Cody Museum in their archives, but for the Indians, they just had them listed as female Indian number 1, female Indian number 2, number 3, male Indian number 1. They didn't have their names.
How come you don't look like Pocahontas? Never mind. I'll throw those in now and then to keep you straight. Yeah. Do you have a religious preference nowadays? Some do and some don't.
I'm agnostic.
Did you have one earlier on in your childhood?
I was raised Catholic, And my father was Southern Baptist with a mixture of Native American beliefs, and he later converted to Catholicism. So I went to Catholic school.
You know, I'm a recovering Catholic, yeah. Yeah. Oh, your education, and I've got 36 pages here to do with your education. But you can do an overview or a summary for us, and I may ask you a question or two that comes to mind as a result of what you're telling me. Your formal education, will you say a little about that?
I started off at Thomas More College in Kentucky, a small Catholic college, and studied psychology. Transferred to the University of Dayton in my junior year due to a boyfriend, and finished my undergraduate at the University of Dayton in psychology, and went on for a master's at the University of Dayton in clinical psychology, and then moved to California where I met you and when I was doing my doctorate in clinical psychology. Yeah.
Any other education worth mentioning? School of Hard Knocks or anything of that nature?
No, not really. Travel is educational.
Oh, you've traveled a lot. Oh, an example. Where have you traveled to? Give us a few examples.
Recently, as in about 2 weeks ago, I got back from 7 Baltic countries. Last year, this time, I was in India. And a couple years ago, before that, I was in Ecuador and Peru and went to the Galapagos. So those are the most recent out-of-the-country travels.
I mentioned we're going to need a couple of hours to cover you, but we're going to need 4 hours because I'm sure you've got some stories about those travels and the places you've been. So you've experienced other cultures and other peoples.
Yeah.
Any who come to mind right now that is significant, that stand out, that just the prompting?
Oh, there's
Baltics or Latin America or what?
Well, the Baltic I thought was interesting in terms of their systems of government, which are all pretty similar. And they have a great program there in terms of what you get. Taxes are high in most of these countries. Generally, one country, I think Sweden, was 28% to about 38%. I think Finland was more like 38 to 50%, but they're all kind of high 20s to about 50%. But for that, you get peace of mind. You can never bottom out there. You can't be homeless.
How about the wealth distribution in those countries? What's the difference between the highest paid person?
There isn't. It's rather narrow. Most people are middle class to kind of upper middle class, it seems. Everybody has a piece of the pie. Nobody seems to have 20 pies.
So there's the poverty level is quite low compared to America and other places?
Oh, negligible.
Negligible.
Yeah. Health care is free, including, for the most part. I think in Finland they said there might be like a $10 US dollar copay for dental or for medications, but virtually things are free, including dental and eye and hearing aids, that you don't pay for that.
Has this been going on since World War II or even before World War II?
I'm not sure when it started.
Yeah. Have you thought about moving to the Baltics?
I would, if I were a younger person, I'd be tempted to move there. Because you really make out they have, for example, most of these countries have about 3 years off for maternity or paternity leave. And either parent can take it and you get 70% of your salary for these 3 years. Child care is either free or largely subsidized, where you pay a very low amount depending upon the country.
How do you feel about those kinds of things in America compared to what you experienced in the Baltics? Like free health care and those financial things, and how that you can get by pretty well in the Baltics, considering those things where money is involved, as compared to what's going on in America, where we're looking for health care for all and those kinds of things. There's a difference, isn't there?
Oh, there's a big difference. I was talking to my daughter the other day about health care cost, and was relating to her how maybe about 10 years ago when I was switching jobs, I had met my deductibles for myself, and my son was still on the policy. and it was a high deductible, I think $6,000 a person. So I'd already met that, and it was an 80-20 kind of policy where they pay 80% and I pay 20%. So I'd met a $12,000 deductible. I was supposed to be starting another job and leaving the hospital where I worked. The hospital was being sold. The sale took place before my transition to the new job, so for 1 month I had a new insurance policy with a new deductible, and my son ended up in the emergency room in hospital. So there went another like $6,000 deductible within a month's time. And I ended up paying close to $30,000 in deductible. Then I started the new job in October. Some more health issues between me and my son. We met that deductible, and we paid nearly $30,000 in 1 year just in the deductibles, not even the 20% copays.
So there is a significant difference.
Oh,
yeah.
which was nearly half my salary at that time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I know you're reconsidering moving to the Baltic. We're getting ahead of ourselves here. So what do you do now? You're still working?
I work and do part-time private practice,
Mm-hmm.
and otherwise travel, do things I like.
Why do you still work? Because you love it? Like it?
I like it. I like doing the private practice.
Uh-huh. You have some interesting cases, and let's not get into a clinical discussion here because
No.
not many guys are psychologists out there. But we've chatted a bit on the phone about that and what you're doing. It sounds like you are pretty thorough in your looking at the human beings that you're spending time with or treating or whatever, and you're pretty thorough in your learning what's going on about them so that you can intervene someplace to have them have a better life, a better existence. And it seems like I have fallen behind in so many years because CE stuff, I've stopped that years ago when I suspended my psychologist license. But we can spend 4 more hours on that. You still like the work that much where you're still doing it?
I do.
When are you going to stop?
I don't know. I suppose if I get sick and can't do it anymore, then I would stop. But otherwise, I don't have a plan to stop in particular.
Do you have any success stories, spectacular, that don't take too long to talk about?
No.
You might recognize who you're talking about. And your partner, you have a partner now, a husband, boyfriend, a girlfriend, or whatever? You're looking for one in the future?
Maybe. Can we flash my number?
Did you hear that out there? Huh? Okay, yeah. Now, her email address is on her name,
Oh,
so
goodness.
you can get a hold of Mary Lee. But, yeah, all right. You mentioned your children, and say a few words about them. You have 3 now?
2.
2, yes. See, I lost count. Tell me about them.
Rachel is a high school English teacher and has been for about 13 years, hoping to become eventually a principal. Very smart girl.
And the boy?
And he works in New York for a hedge fund.
I see the look on your face.
He's very good in math.
Uh-huh.
Very good, and was always interested in that from the time he was little.
Is he a Trump supporter? Never mind, don't you?
No.
Because mom doesn't want to divorce him. I know. Yeah. And your political persuasion nowadays, are you on the left or the right or what?
Left.
Uh-huh. How far left? As far as I am?
Maybe not as far as you are.
Nobody as far as I am. How about the difference between sympathy and empathy? I bet you can answer that one. The difference between those two.
Yeah, I think empathy is having really a feeling for the other person and connecting with them, imagining how it would be if you were walking in that person's shoes. Whereas sympathy can kind of have an aspect to it, I think, where it's kind of an unequal relationship where you can be looking down on somebody a little bit.
Interesting. I've not heard it put that way before. I'll remember that.
Okay.
Yeah, and persons from the past are alive today that you particularly admire or admired or look up to. Any names come to mind for you? Political or social or whatever?
Malala, the girl from Pakistan.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, say a few words about her. I remember her.
Oh, I think she's great, very well spoken and very determined to carry on her message about equality for people and for women.
Was she wounded?
She was shot in the head.
Yes.
Yeah, somebody tried to assassinate her because she was speaking out for the rights of young women and girls to be educated.
Are you a feminist?
Yes.
Doing a dumb question. You follow what's going on with Malala, or just from the news reports about what her life is about, what she's doing? She's still doing the work that you're talking about? Yeah. Anybody else come to mind?
I like Bernie Sanders.
I knew there was something else wrong with you. What do you like about Bernie?
I think he's a very authentic and honest person. Very passionate.
Are you authentic and honest?
I think most of the time.
Yeah, I know how to punch your buttons. I remember now. It's all coming back to me now. Yeah. Any other names come to mind of anybody else that you look up to in your life or from your memory or whatever? I've been doing this for so many years. I've got a collection of names that I've categorized them because I've asked the same questions oftentimes of my guests. So my order is Jesus, and I'm a recovering Catholic, Gandhi and Martin Luther King and a few others, and I lose track because there's so darn many. People won't believe it anymore. On the left or progressive, still existing in the world. Of course, we don't hear as much about them as I would like us to hear because of what they're about, and justice and those kinds of issues. And I like to see myself walking in the footsteps a little bit as best I can, knowing full well I can never appreciate the level of compassion and loving and kindness of those kinds of people I mentioned offhand. Yeah.
What about living people for you?
Yeah. It's amazing. I've never had that question fired back at me. Yeah. Bernie Sanders, of course, and not Netanyahu, no. I'll ponder that. Thank you.
Okay.
You should wear my my host interviewer's title now. Okay. How do you see the mainstream media in America today? Is it leftist, centrist, or right, or what?
I think it depends on who you're talking about. You're talking about
generally speaking, overall.
Oh. Generally speaking, I guess if you take Fox News on the right and the other news, other media on more to the left or middle, it averages out to more of the middle. I think Fox is clearly very much to the right.
Yeah. I had an awareness just a couple days ago. It seems this big discussion now going on about denuclearization with North Korea, denuclearization. And even in the left-leaning media on television, I find someone is still going along with that definition or that focus of what we're about. And but nobody talks about why nuclearization exists in the first place. And that's a coinage of the American media, I think, because North Korea has nuclear capability. So if we're denuclearizing, everybody should denuclearize. And see, I'm a pie in the sky, Pollyanna kind of a person. So this made me get a little angry at the media, completely ignoring the fact, and they're reporting, they're describing what's going on. They don't talk about why it is that North Korea had nuclear weapons in the first place. So I'm a little mad at the media, at the print media and the television media for that matter, for not being more objective. And then I think about Trump and I thought, well, it could be worse. All right, so maybe it's time for us to take a break, but first I want to take a break from what we're talking about, the serious stuff, because I've got a poem from my poetry group, and Sidney Lizundia, Lizundia, and this will probably take a couple of minutes for me to read it, and I think you'll appreciate it. And occasionally she comes up with pieces that are so delightful, kind of free form. Insomnia. Insomnia crept under the covers with me in bed last night at midnight. It likes to keep me awake at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., and so on. It is an unyielding, gleeful foe. It interferes with plans, robs me of energy, and messes with my mind. How do you combat this evil demon? I have already counted 2 million sheep, from the green hills of New Zealand to the mountains of the Spanish Pyrenees. I can count backwards from 113 languages. I have done scissor kicks, jumping jacks. I have marched resolutely up and down stairs. I have meditated with Buddha, chanted with the monks, and practiced deep breathing exercises with a long-gone cat. I've listened to the soothing melodies of Brahms, sought wisdom from the twinkling stars, and composed poetry before dawn. I have even offered bribery, my prized teddy bear, my sleeping husband. Insomnia just giggled at that. Apparently I have no defense against this sorcerer. None, I say. Can you help me? Will you help me? Please help me. So thank you. Sidney, thank you for that. All right. So let's take a break, and then after a few minutes, we'll come back and talk about other stuff. Okay. Liked you, didn't you? Yeah. Okay. It's time for us to come back and talk about what's going to go on for the rest of the show. And for your viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about tonight. And I'm smiling because I always blow this canned speech, you know. And my guest this evening is Mary Lee Darr, a long time friend, and discovered her recently, not too recently, and got her to come out here and come on the show so I can show her off to you guys, my viewers out there. And there's a lot of stories behind all these years that we weren't together, including how I married you and your first husband, and we had other relationships, and I was teaching transactional analysis. We need another 4 hours, I think, huh? And we mentioned Alzheimer's as possibly a topic we can discuss. And you mentioned that your father had Alzheimer's, but then something just happened this morning at the gym. I go regularly. And there's a fellow there who was a retired dentist, and we laughed and kid each other through the years. But then this morning when I was in the hot tub, he came out of the men's dressing room, and he didn't have any swimsuit on at all. And the pool was full of people. There must have been 30 or 35 people in there. All, of course, had swimsuits on like that. And I said to myself, what are you doing? And then another guy saw me, and he was trying to get him. So he stood there by the pool, between the hot tub and the pool, and he was just standing there. And finally his wife came to the edge of the pool, the main pool, and trying to get him back into the dressing room. So to make a long story short, finally I said, there's something really going on here, because we've laughed and joked for years. So I finally got him back into the dressing room, but then apparently he lost his locker. I'd never seen him with any symptoms at all. And to finish this story, finally I had to stop what I was doing in the dressing room to be sure we could get him out of there and into the foyer where his wife was waiting for him. Because in the meantime, a couple of other people said his wife was looking for him. I guess she hadn't seen him get that bad so quickly. So I finally got him out there, and 20 minutes later, I looked out there, he was still there, and his wife was still sitting there reading a magazine or something. He still didn't have his shoes on yet. And it really shook me. And in the dressing room, the other guys were seeing what was going on, and I was measuring how much I had to direct him or take care of him. And and I see the look on your face and your eyes. Bring back any memories of your father?
Yeah, my father...
Is it okay to talk about it?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, my father had Alzheimer's, and I was living in Atlanta at the time that I was starting to suspect this, and they were in Cincinnati. And I was trying to get them moved down. And, before that, when I lived in Los Angeles, they came out to visit once, and there was never a direct flight from Cincinnati to L.A., so they always changed planes in Dallas. And my mother called me up frantic at the Dallas airport, saying that she'd lost my father in the airport, that he had gone into the restroom. And she waited and waited for him to come out in by the door where he went in, and she asked a man to go in and check. And he said, well, there was no one in there. And he said, maybe he went out the other side. She didn't know it was a type of restroom that had an entrance here and another one over there. And he'd gone out the other side and was wandering around the Dallas airport.
And that was the first indication that he had Alzheimer's?
Well, there had been, I had some suspicions a few years earlier when I'd gone to visit them, and my daughter was 6 months old, and we were in the back seat of the car waiting to make a left turn onto their street, and they were stopped at a red light. All of a sudden, my father takes off from the red light and turns left on the red light in front of oncoming traffic. And we all kind of go, And he said, oh no, it's a new law in Ohio that you can make a left turn on red after you stop.
How old was he then? About?
Let's see. In his 60s, probably mid-60s. And my mother was trying to explain it was, no, you can make a right turn on red after you stop. And he was convinced it was a left turn on red.
Wow.
And then a couple years later when they came to visit, that she lost him in the Dallas airport, and that was a production. Of course, I couldn't do anything being in Los Angeles. And they eventually found him and got him reunited with my mother, but he couldn't remember his last name, which was news to her, because she would always refer to it as he had a touch of Alzheimer's. Like you have a touch of hay fever. Yeah, she minimized it and had a lot of denial about that, but that scared her. And then they decided to sell the house up there and move down with me. And he was pretty far into the Alzheimer's then by the time they moved down in 92, and he had to come down on a medical plane. I got a medical flight for him to come down on. And he had deteriorated so much in a few months that from being able to hold kind of a superficial conversation and to being pretty immobilized and not able to walk, that he required this medical plane. He thought he was back on the Queen Mary coming back from World War II. He was somewhat oriented for situation. He knew he was on a vehicle that was moving, but totally disoriented with time, you know, thinking it was way back in the 40s, coming back from World War II, and that he was on the Queen Mary again. Because he could tell he was moving, and he was on some kind of vehicle. So that was a shock to me when I saw him in that shape after several months earlier, him still being able to walk somewhat and get around and converse superficially. But he was getting harder and harder for my mother to manage. And like with your friend at the gym, what cognition he had, he seemed to focus on when my mother would go into the bathroom, you know, to brush her teeth and get cleaned up and change clothes, and she was never a primper, so she would be in and out in 20 minutes, and she would get him set up and dressed and in his chair downstairs in front of the TV or the window. He started being able to focus on her getting out of the room, and during that time he would strip down all of his clothes except for his socks and shoes and then take off out the door and go up the street.
So she was by herself with him at that time?
Yeah, and that's why they were moving down to live with me.
Yeah. And how long were the symptoms, how many years were the symptoms there going on with him?
I'd say probably about 13 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
It must have affected you.
Well, I lived in opposite ends of the country, first in Los Angeles, and they were in Cincinnati, and then Atlanta, and they were in Cincinnati. And then when I got him moved down on Memorial Day in 92, he was in such bad shape, he had started having strokes. He had to go into a rehab facility, but I'd had part of my house redone, an area in my house with wheelchair accessible doorways and grab bars. But he was never even able to come back and live in the house. He would have another stroke at the rehab place and then go to the hospital, and it flip-flopped back and forth between the hospital and the nursing home for rehab, and he died there in August. So he was down there for a very short time.
Brothers and sisters in the family?
I had two half-sisters from my father's first marriage, but didn't really know them.
So responsible and caring for your father was up to your mother, for the most part, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, until she moved down with me. Yeah.
So I could see it in your eyes, some semblance of what it must have been going on for you at that time. Yeah. You have a particular interest now in Alzheimer's, or people with Alzheimer's, or the condition itself as a result of that?
Somewhat. I have a relative, not a new dog, he's 4 years old now, but I was training him to be a therapy dog, and he failed his test. But it wasn't his fault. Because he's a little overly friendly. But I take him to a nursing home with a friend whose dog is certified. So Harvey's kind of illegal there, but they haven't asked for his papers, so don't ask, don't tell. He goes to the nursing home and he visits people who have dementia.
How old is he now?
My dog?
Yeah.
Oh, he's 4 years old.
Yeah. So you have any other animals?
4 cats.
That's right. You told me about that. See, my memory is not all gone completely.
Oh, no. You have a good memory. Yeah.
You have a good relationship with your cats, and you're still available for a new husband.
What's the likelihood with 4 cats? This is why I'm single.
Yeah, we have, I live in Beaverton, Oregon, which is a suburb of Portland. And my neighbor has been there moved in a couple years ago, and turns out they've got a pair of cats, and they're a hybrid, I guess, part bobcat and part other cat, and with the short tails and like that. And they're interesting. Cats are weird and interesting anyhow. But there's, I can't think of the names right now, but they hang out at my house more than at their own house. And Pat loves cats.
I know, yeah.
And I'm allergic to cats.
I know.
Yeah. But whatever's going on in the house, and of course we ups and downs in a relationship, you know, in a marriage. And no matter what's going on with us, and occasionally we're in the middle of something, solving some new problem, so to speak, and then Butch or Bodie, that's their names, would show up, either one of them, and all the troubles go away. Pat flops herself on the floor or the ground, wherever she is when she sees him, and he comes over, either one of them, and they have a nice conversation. And it's interesting how independent they are. And you never know how much attention they're going to give you. And sometimes one of them will hang out forever and watch, and she feeds him like that, sitting on the ground. But then he has some other interest going on. It takes off. It's utterly fascinating. Tell me some cat stories.
Oh, cat stories. Well, when I got back from the Baltic, my cats really missed me, and the male cat's very attached to me and very sweet. And he comes up and looks in my eyes and he pats me on the cheek.
He does?
And he slept by my face all night, and all night long I'd feel him reaching over and patting me on the cheek. Yeah.
That kind of made your heart go pit.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting stories.
Yeah.
So, we have some more stories about Alzheimer's, or shall we go on to something else?
I think we can go on to something else.
What shall we go to?
Something on here, or?
Something from the top of your head or from on here. Either way, it's up to you now, because...
I was thinking back to you talking about empathy before.
Yes.
And empathy in animals. A lot of animals show empathy. And I was thinking about, and I was talking to my daughter about this the other day. One of my dogs had to have hip or leg surgery, I forget now, and had to be crated for a while she recovered. And then she was able to go into the half bathroom and stay there, but she couldn't run or jump and had to stay contained. And I had 2 dogs at the time, a little beagle mix, and I gave him a treat, and he walked away with it. He walked to the front of the bathroom door where my other dog was in this half bathroom. He dropped, and it was on a hardwood floor, so the door was raised up a little bit. He dropped the biscuit in front of the door and pushed it under the door.
He did?
To give
what a story.
Yeah, very sweet.
Yeah?
Yeah.
If it were anybody else, I would doubt that really happened. You created it, but that's wonderful. But to be that observant. Yeah. So you've just got the 1 dog left now?
Yes, I have 1 dog.
You were interested in another one?
No.
The cats occupy the rest of your time.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think animals have a great capacity for empathy and knowing if you don't feel well.
Oh, yes.
Whether it's a person or another animal.
I got a story about empathy, about cats. Before my MD allergist discovered my severe allergies through the years, before we discovered that I was highly allergic to cats, I had Kathmandu, or Kathmandu 2 was my cat who adopted me. It took months. I was living in Azusa in Southern California, and I'd come in the driveway, and then the back of my property was an alley, a lot of greenery back there, and I'd see this cat, just a quick glance, and he'd disappear when I first came home, from work. And then as time took a long time, he would linger a little longer where I could see him through the gate. And I'll make this part of the story short. It took months before he would even come into the backyard. And finally I had him, I lured him into, he must have been a feral cat, into the laundry room at the back of the house. And we had this relationship, and once or twice he brought a bird in, and I screamed at him, and then I realized, hey, it's only a cat, you know. But then we discovered with the animal doctor that he had severe gingivitis and other serious stuff through the years, and I had to give him a medication. And it got so until I used to have to wrap him in towels and send him on the sink and wrap him up really good and pry his mouth open and stick a little pill in there. It got so until I'd say, Mandu, that's his nickname, come on up, it's time for your medicine. He'd crop up on and he'd set himself in profile, and I'd kind of touch him and then say, okay, open your mouth, and he'd open his mouth. Yeah, he did. At first, he'd open his mouth and then he'd decide and spit it out. But finally, he would just obey. But the end of the story is that my godmother, my legal mother, a sister of mine, Louise, passed away finally. And I went to the funeral and like that. And when I got back home, it was a beautiful summer day. And I was in the sunroom, and I was laying on my back, and Kathmandu had a habit. When I laid down, he'd crawl on my chest, and with his face facing mine. And we just doze away there like perfectly. So then suddenly we were comfortable, and suddenly out of me came this burst of pain. I denied the loss all this time. And Kathmandu, he tried to pry his little paws into my chest, and he looked at me in a totally different way. And finally, I just sobbed like that. The tears were just gushing out of me. And I calmed down because he was surprising me. Besides, I'm experiencing the death of my legal mother, my mother like that. And Kathmandu was right there. He was a totally different cat then. And he just kept trying to get himself into my breast. That's a fact. Kathmandu. You know the story?
Yeah.
But the relationship between different species, I think it depends on our abilities, humans' ability, more to be aware of those capabilities that are built into us as living human animals, so to speak. So we're going to need another 4 hours. That's my cat story, and I like to repeat it now and then.
Yeah.
But I'm reliving it as I'm talking to you about it, and I hope I'm doing a good job. Kathmandu, but I never had a cat since then, because then I discovered I was so severely allergic to cats. My allergist says, no way, you can't have a cat anymore. So I adopted Kathmandu out. I found, I put an ad in the paper, and in the ad I said all the peculiarities about him and the strange things, and how you had to really get attached to him because he's so unique. I called him my Burmese prince. He was jet black, gorgeous. And finally, an actor lived in Hollywood, and even all the descriptions I had about Kathmandu and how weird he was. So the person living in that house was interested in Kathmandu, so I brought Kathmandu there to see this person in the house. And when we opened the front door to this house where Kathmandu was going to live, Kathmandu jumped out of my arms and went over across the room, and then there was a mantelpiece. And he stood on the mantelpiece and posed in profile. Just fantastic. Cat stories. But anyhow, he got lost because the house where he was adopted to, there were coyotes there. But I used to get a report monthly about the status of Kathmandu, and then finally the guy who adopted him says, yeah, he disappeared, and we're pretty sure the coyotes got him.
Oh, that's a sad story.
You're so emotionally literate. Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're yelling at me. It's time to wind down. We have about 6 minutes or so left to talk about anything else, or anything comes to mind that we should occupy our time with, other than how delightful I am to see you experience and react to my stories.
Oh. I can't think of anything.
Uh-huh. Yeah. We had another one that we were going to talk about for a bit.
Let's see.
Male-female inequality. Right. Yeah. You're a feminist. You're not a woman's libber. Or you know the difference between a woman's libber and a feminist?
What?
A feminist says, you've been doing this to me all my life, and I will not allow you to do that anymore. Mm-hmm. A woman's libber says, you've been doing this to me all my life, now I'm going to do the same thing to you for the rest of your life.
Oh.
You're not a libber, are you?
No. No, you have to be nice.
Yeah. So, what else would you like to tell the viewers about yourself? Any more stories?
Well, we were talking a little bit before we started about the woman who set herself on fire because she was going to be married off at 15 to...
Melania, what's her name?
No, not Malala. The Indian, the family who was going to marry the daughters off. And the one girl ran away because she didn't want to be married off at 15 to a stranger. And the other one the younger sister set herself on fire. And when I traveled in India, it's a very male-centric culture.
Yes.
And sons never leave their families. They stay with their parents for their whole life.
I remember that, yes.
And so when they marry, the woman moves in with them into their parents' home.
What a strange relationship. It works for them, huh?
Yeah. Hard on the woman. We met several people there and went into several homes. And one woman was talking about how difficult it was for her when she first married her husband, as he was one of 3 sons, and they all lived in a compound at that point, but initially it was one house. And so when she got married, he was the last son to get married, so she moved in with 14 strangers, her mother-in-law and her father-in-law, her 2 brothers-in-law and 2 sisters-in-law, and her husband, whom she didn't really know, and all of the children of the other 2 brothers.
Mm-hmm.
So she moved in with 14 people, and she'd grown up with her father and younger sister. Her mother died when she was young, so she came from a very small family and moved to another city into this situation with 14 strangers, all in the same house.
Could you be a part of that family?
Well, that would be very hard to integrate into a situation like that, especially when you didn't know anyone.
It's amazing the difference in human beings in different cultures around the world.
Mm-hmm.
I still can't grasp the idea, and I think I can. Stories go that Inuit or the Eskimos and the traders or whatever would show up, and if they liked each other, why the husband would invite the guest to sleep with his wife.
Mm-hmm.
You heard those stories?
I've heard that.
You think that's true?
I don't know.
I'm too jealous. I couldn't handle it.
I don't know. Collectivistic cultures share.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But then how much could you change to adapt to some sort of a radical approach to mating? Do you think you'd be able to adjust to something radically different than what we have in America?
Not at this point. If you grow up like that and that's all you know, I guess you go with the flow then.
Yeah. Well, since we're winding down, I got 5 minutes on. We're going to have to stop.
Okay.
I would like you to look at that camera and talk to the viewers about anything that's on your mind that we talked about or anything else. And you have 30 seconds or 45 seconds to talk to the viewers. Final thoughts?
Oh, final thoughts. Well, I guess I would say travel is valuable. You get to see how other people live and walk in other people's shoes and experience how people live very similarly or differently in other parts of the world. I think it's a valuable use of your time and money to do that.
Would you do it again if you had to do it all over again?
Oh, travel?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm continuing to travel.
All right, well, how about a couple of public service announcements that I usually share with my viewers? And to watch my shows on the web, Google Don Baham YouTube, there's hundreds of shows on through the years, and you'll find some interesting characters and interesting guests. And I'm a humanist, recovering Catholic. To learn more about humanists and humanism, go to www.americanhumanist.org, and there's a phone number, the local phone number here in Oregon, to learn more about the Alliance for Democracy. That's a famous organization that I belong to. Go to the national website at the Alliance for Democracy. It's a leftist organization. And the Portland, Oregon website at afd@pdx.org. Oh, my favorite, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Without the ACLU, our civil liberties would be further down the tubes than they are. So go to the website to learn more. Oh, I got to tell you about learning how to end corporate personhood. Corporate personhood, that's an awful thing. That says that corporations are persons and money is speech. So go to the website and learn how to move to amend the Constitution to take care of this problem in a wonderful, wonderful experiment in democracy called America. Thanks for watching. I'm glad you were here to see me talking to my old friend Mary Lee. And remember KFC, and not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. And be kind, and be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you too. And you too in the control room. And you too on the other side of the control room. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.